Russia didn't wake up one morning worried about Czechia. That's not how this happened. There was no dramatic announcement, no red line crossed, no moment that screamed escalation. And that's exactly why it mattered. Because when Czechia quietly moved another piece into place, something Russia relies on began to disappear. Not territory, not weapons, but options. For years, Moscow treated Central Europe as a predictable space. Supportive of Ukraine, yes, but cautious. Helpful, but contained. A region that amplified pressure without directly shaping the battlefield. That assumption is no longer safe. What changed wasn't one transfer or one decision. What changed was posture. Czechia stopped behaving like a background supporter and started acting like an operator inside the system that constrains Russia's war effort. Not loudly, not emotionally, but structurally. And when structure changes, reactions come late, because by the time you feel it, the door is already closing. From Moscow's perspective, this wasn't about generosity toward Ukraine. It was about something more uncomfortable. Russia's ability to manage the pace, cost, and predictability of the war just took another hit from a country it never planned to fear. That's the part most people miss. Czechia isn't threatening Russia directly. It doesn't need to. Its role sits somewhere far more dangerous, inside the machinery that decides how long Russia can sustain pressure without breaking something it can't afford to lose. This is how Russia gets boxed in now. Not by dramatic confrontations, but by quiet decisions that remove flexibility one layer at a time. And once flexibility disappears, every future move starts carrying more risk than the last. That's the position Moscow is waking up to, and it didn't arrive with a warning label. For a long time, Russia misread Czechia in the same way it misread much of Central Europe. Supportive, but secondary. Committed, but not decisive. That reading made sense a decade ago. It doesn't anymore. What Moscow failed to account for is how Czechia's role quietly evolved from political supporter to operational enabler. Not a state making noise on social media, a state shaping outcomes through logistics, training, repair cycles, and now air defense adjacent capability. This is where the picture shifts. When Czechia announced it would transfer combat aircraft to support Ukraine's fight against drones, the story wasn't about the airframes themselves. It wasn't about whether those aircraft would dominate the skies or change the front overnight. Russia doesn't think in those terms anymore, and neither should anyone else. The real issue is what that move signals. It tells Moscow that Czechia is no longer operating on the margins of the conflict. It's operating inside the problem Russia is struggling with the most right now: sustainability. Drone warfare isn't about single strikes. It's about volume, endurance, and attrition. Every drone intercepted costs Russia time, attention, and resources. Every layer added to Ukraine's air defense network stretches Russia's production timelines and forces adaptation faster than Moscow would like. By stepping into that space, Czechia isn't escalating. It's narrowing Russia's margins, and those margins matter more than territory at this stage of the war. From Moscow's perspective, Central Europe used to function as a buffer zone of support, helpful, but slow-moving. What's happening now is different. Czechia is aligning itself with the operational tempo of the conflict rather than the political tempo around it. That's dangerous for Russia because it accelerates pressure without triggering the kind of dramatic escalation Moscow knows how to respond to. No threats to condemn, no single delivery to retaliate against, just another system quietly making the battlefield harder to manage. And once that pattern sets in, it doesn't reverse easily. This isn't about Czechia acting alone either. It's about how its actions plug into a wider network that Russia can't isolate or intimidate without paying costs elsewhere. That's the box tightening. From Moscow's point of view, the most dangerous moves aren't loud. They're cumulative. What Czechia just did didn't slam a door shut. It narrowed a passage Russia had been relying on without admitting it existed. For years, Russia treated Central Europe as strategically predictable, not hostile in the way the Baltics were framed, not confrontational like Poland, reliable supporters of Ukraine, yes, but still operating at a pace Moscow believed it could absorb. That assumption shaped Russian planning. Pressure would peak at the front. Support would trickle from the rear. Time would eventually work in Russia's favor. Czechia's trajectory breaks that logic. because this isn't a country reacting emotionally to headlines. It's a country aligning itself with the specific problem Russia is failing to solve: how to fight a long war without hemorrhaging capacity faster than it can replace it. Drone warfare exposed a weakness Russia can't brute force away. Interception is expensive, adaptation takes time, and every new layer added to Ukraine's defenses compounds the cost curve against Moscow. Czechia isn't trying to win the war on its own. It's doing something more effective. It's making Russia's preferred path forward narrower, slower, and more resource-intensive. That's what closing a door looks like in modern conflict. Not a blockade, not a declaration, a steady removal of options. And from Russia's perspective, this is especially uncomfortable because it comes from a country Moscow once believed it understood. Czechia knows Russian military culture well. It inherited Soviet-era systems, transitioned away from them, and learned exactly where Russian doctrine relies on assumptions that no longer hold. That institutional memory matters. It allows Prague to target support where it hurts most, not where it looks most dramatic. This is why Moscow can't easily counter it. There's no obvious escalation ladder to climb. Retaliation risks widening the problem. Ignoring it allows the pressure to accumulate. Either choice costs Russia time, and time is the one resource Moscow can't regenerate quickly enough. That's the trap. Czechia isn't challenging Russia head-on. It's helping remove the exits Russia planned to use later. And once exits disappear, wars stop being about ambition. They become about survival. Russia's real vulnerability right now isn't manpower, tanks, or even sanctions fatigue. It's predictability. For most of the war, Moscow operated on one core belief: that Western support would fragment under pressure. Not collapse overnight, but thin out, slow down, become politically costly enough that Ukraine would eventually be forced to negotiate from weakness. That belief shaped everything from force rotations to ammunition planning to how aggressively Russia absorbed losses. Czechia undermines that belief in a very specific way. It doesn't posture, it doesn't hesitate, it doesn't signal fatigue. Instead, it keeps feeding into the exact layers of the war that scale over time: systems, logistics, sustainment, and now air defense against drones. One of the few areas where Russia believed it held a growing advantage. That matters because Russia's drone strategy wasn't designed to win quickly. It was designed to exhaust, to force Ukraine to spend more per interception than Russia spent per launch, to stretch defenses thin enough that something eventually slips through. Czechia's involvement interferes with that math. Not by making drones irrelevant, but by denying Russia the assumption that this pressure would go unanswered. Each added defensive layer increases uncertainty on the Russian side. Not will this work, but how long before this stops working. And uncertainty is corrosive to planning. Russian commanders can adapt tactically. They've proven that. What they struggle with is strategic recalibration when the timeline keeps moving. Every time a country like Czechia deepens its role, the endpoint Russia was counting on shifts further away. That's exhausting. It forces Moscow to keep multiple futures alive at once. Escalation, stalemate, breakthrough, without knowing which one will materialize. Resources get split, priorities blur, decisions become reactive instead of deliberate. This is why Czechia's actions land differently than headline-grabbing moves from larger powers. They're not symbolic, they're structural. They quietly reinforce the idea that support for Ukraine isn't peaking, it's hardening. And from Russia's point of view, that's worse than escalation. Because escalation can be answered, hardening support can only be endured. Czechia didn't beat Russia with one dramatic headline. It tightened the system Russia depends on. That's why it matters. Moscow can threaten, posture, escalate, but it can't easily reverse a country that's moved from support into infrastructure. Once support becomes routine, pressure stops working on schedule. And when Russia loses control of timing, every option gets riskier. That's what boxed in actually means.